This is the Educational Triage Podcast. Welcome. We invite you to come along with us on an exploration of interviews, issues, and other exciting and relevant topics in education, especially alternative education. They say alternative education is a laboratory for mainstream education. Why? Well, join us every week and listen in as Philip Summers
Aloha.
and I, Tony Hunt, jump in feet first to discuss issues that may affect our classes, students, communities, as well as our teaching. Please subscribe if you enjoy and find relevance in what you experience here. And if you haven't left a quick review, please do. We appreciate your candor and insights so we can improve as we move forward. Now, let's see what's on board today.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Educational Triage. This is Tony, and I'm joined today with the incomparable Philip Summers.
Aloha, it's me, Philip. How you doing, Tony?
Oh, God.
You came up with a kind of a DJ voice, so I thought I would too. How you doing?
Oh, okay. Hey, listen, today we are going to be talking about, what is it? Remind me?
Oh, it was News Day. You said you wanted to do some articles, some current
We
events.
did, and so this is kind of our first one, but tell us about your first. Tell us about our first and only story that we're going to do today, because it really is, it's somewhat, we might get into some other stories, but for now, let's just talk about this one. And so you're going to lead us off with this. What is it?
Well, this one, I was searching around and I found the usual stuff. I go all over the place. Tony's more of a print guy. I'm kind of a video and see what's happening. And I stay away from big titles like "The world's gonna end" and "We're all gonna die" things, because those aren't worth anything. But I did come across a CNBC report. It said why the educational system is failing in America, which is fairly alarming. However, the sources, it looked like it was worth looking at, and so I watched it, and it was an enticing piece. I thought there was some good points in it. I agreed with many. It had a lot of logic to it. It was well thought out. It had a good chronological sort of pattern to why things were the way they were. I have a couple of things I could add to that too. That I could support. But yeah, it was about 15 minutes long, something like that. There was the initial parts of I really truly agreed with. The first premise was the reasons that they kind of came up with the reason Common Core was sort of the central feature of why it was failing. It wasn't. There's no one thing of why there's a big failure in American education, but Common Core was sort of the way it came down. Is the path that focused everyone toward it was Common Core. Originally, No Child Left Behind, I might add, when Common Core really focused it in.
Right. No Child Left Behind started off this idea that schools had to have rigor, and so they started cutting things like they started cutting PE, they started cutting recess time, they started eliminating as much as possible, because everybody said that we need to focus in on instruction time and learning time for the kids. So we really have to do that. And then Obama came up with Race to the Top, which reinforced everything.
It started with Senator Patrick Moynihan and Why Johnny Can't Read in the late 60s, which alarmed America that we were falling behind in the international competition for smart kids because of testing.
Right. And then we
Nation
had
at
Nation
Risk.
at Risk.
And you know what they did? They did some research back into those kids in the 60s and the early 70s who took those tests and why they were falling behind. Because we remember our nation had sent people to the moon and such. We were really at the forefront of scientific and mathematical innovation. And in many ways still are. And how is that if we're failing in these tests? It was because we had this attitude. One of them was we had this attitude in America. The kids didn't care. They would, quite frankly, on these tests, fill in bubbles, or it wasn't really the attitude on the test that they really should have had. Whereas kids in Japan, it was the test. It was a social value to really value the test. It was how their school systems really ran. And in many places all over the globe, especially Eastern Europe and under communist bloc countries, the test was supreme. In America, it was sort of a joke. I remember that myself. No one told us why we were taking them. And so a lot of times the kids just didn't really take it seriously. And so
I remember taking an intelligence test.
I
in the
remember
first grade.
testing, but I never took it.
And here I was, 5 years old,
Yeah.
taking this test. And I went home and I said, we took an intelligence test today. And my mom said, oh, what words didn't you understand? And I told her. And she said, you should know those words. And I'm like, I'm 5 years
Right.
old, Mom.
I remember just not knowing. They go, today we're going to do these tests. And I thought, okay. And it's not the same value as it is across the globe. And so we weren't that dumb, but yeah. And they took a lot away from the kids to make sure they do well in these darn tests. But like you said,
We have the same capacity in our students and in ourselves to be as competitive as other countries. The difference is the culture.
Exactly.
The culture of the school, the culture of the family, the culture of the community, the culture of the country. Now, I know somebody who teaches at a German school. In fact, he might be
Wow.
the headmaster. And he was saying, here in America, it's nothing for a parent to receive a phone call from the school usually. In Germany, if the school calls your parents, that is one of the most deafening, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen. You do not do anything that would bring about a phone call home. You have disrespected your family, which I found really interesting. And I said, and I spoke to other people, and they said, "Well, yeah, because parents expect you to go there, behave, fall in line, and learn, do what you're supposed to do." Here in the States, though, we give all kinds of leeway.
Maybe. I mean, we do, but
and we don't really have as much parental support as possibly
it's
they
almost
do
like it's a
in other
parental
countries.
extension of their freedom. We're cowboys. We're capitalists. We're individuals. No one's going to tell an American what to do. And it almost extends to our kids. Listen, son, they tell you what, if you come across a bully, you kick them right there. Or you come tell me and I'll take care of it, kind of thing. And it's a cultural value to almost be, I'll take care of it, or I'll stick up for you, or I'm an individual. It's really an American value.
But that's not saying that the Germans or the French or the English or the other people aren't
they're not saying they don't possess the same qualities,
saying,
but it's not one of their values to be really individualistic, like almost defiantly so. Like, I'll show this storm. I'll stand out here. It's almost, sometimes Americans are very extreme in their individualism. It really achieves a lot, like the SAS in Britain say, who dares wins. But it's also very consequential if you don't. Americans are very individualistic, and it kind of shows.
Well, yeah, but the problem is that where you have parents who have high expectations for their kids in other countries, those same expectations aren't here because the parents send you to school. Sure, they expect you to learn, but it's also a babysitting.
No, I mean, service. I knew that. I mean, I certainly sent my son to school, and he ended up graduating with a 3.9 something. But and he enjoyed it.
Right.
He did the school thing well. He knew it wasn't a babysitting service. He got 2 varsity letters, only because they had a terrible football team, and they ran out of linemen. He was a big kid and he'd played it before. It was kind of strange, but yeah, I mean, he just did the thing well. Um, yeah, I knew they wouldn't babysit him. Not all of it. It wasn't like, yeah, he did really well, and so did my other son, but he went to junior college. Both my daughters, my other daughter went to alternative and did really well, and my other daughter is sort of bohemian, and she graduated with a diploma. So I think some of them do.
I think that there is more.
Yeah.
There are more people who feel that there is an obligation by the schools to watch their kids while
Yes.
they're at work.
Or what am I going to do if you're not going to do it? Yeah.
Exactly. And so as I mean, you know,
You're
the 1 to
absolutely right,
14% of outcomes happen at the school, and the rest of them are outside. So how much are the parents actually reinforcing what the students learn at school,
Yeah.
working with them to do that? And how do you
talked
work
about
with
that.
parents? How do you work with the parents?
Yeah.
And we have talked about this in the community, where the parents don't have much of an education at all.
Yeah.
And the other story that we might get to today, I
Yeah.
hope, possibly, is one on the reading failures, which is humongous. So
yeah,
okay,
when you get to that Common Core issue,
I-
though, when you get to
I
that
would have
testing,
to
as
say-
it gets forward, it got, like you said,
Right.
removed those things that were fun about school, the recess time, the PE and music, really reduced.
well, they're necessary. Those are all necessary for
Yeah.
students to build relationships. And when they talk about how there's been an explosion in ADHD among students, guess what?
Yes.
Young boys, because of the way that their
Yeah.
brains are wired, they have to have those breaks where they can run around like maniacs so that they can focus and everything else can settle back down, so that, because without that, yeah,
I've
they're
been
going
doing
to
a
have
little,
too much
a
energy.
little visual
They have too much energy.
Research has. I have found that there are also some young girls who are getting up going, I'm going, wow, there's a little female population doing a little hyperactive behavior. And, you know, another thing, too, I've noticed is there's some people mentioning flow states, which involves a ton of focus and where it goes and how it goes there. But they're coming from the angle of focus itself. So they're saying, and our focus is being stolen by devices and by things that are trying to steal it from every place, you know, television, people, just it's being delivered in such bite-sized pieces. We don't really have a long focus thing. For example, when we read a screen, we read in a pattern that goes in almost like a Z. We go across the top, we scroll down, we go across the bottom, and we scan. And it's not the same as a page, a written page. It's almost like our focus is being hijacked. And focus, of course, flow states is that focus settles into a calm central state where it's just the most relaxed, easy place to be. Your learning is just hypered. You're calm. You lose track of time. Everything is so much easier, whether you're cooking something or skiing a slope, it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, it's just getting to the point where that focus is being hyper vigilant. You know, now we must learn this problem. Focus now. And no, you must not release your energy on the playground or in music or in PE. Yeah.
Right. And so there is, you alluded to the, you know, the TV. Back in the early 80s with the release of MTV,
Yeah.
the clips of MTV and the music videos, because they were spliced so shortly together, they talked about how that was shortening people's attention spans. And I want to say that they called it the MTV effect, but they applied it in more as they went through. And so, because that's how things are edited now, is that they're quick.
It started with the songs too, and they started hitting the radio. No song could be more than 2 hours and 30 or 2 minutes and 30 seconds. They used to cut the heck out of songs. Well, even like when they went on the radio in like 1952 or 1958 and 1962, like If it went to the radio, it could be no more than like 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Well, Don McLean.
Yeah, after a while, like I
water,
can't remember the first band when the Beatles came. Like, okay, I guess whatever. But yeah,
So what happened historically is the fact that they realized that one state and another state and another state,
yeah,
they weren't aligned. So if, let's say that for some reason or other, you became a refugee from this state and you ran over to, let's say,
yep.
Michigan, and you went to school there, that things were going to be really different when you got there. Or they might be similar, but they're still not going to be the same. So they wanted to have a national standard, and that's when they started forming the Common Core curriculum, which not every state
They never did
adhered
from the
to.
very beginning, so it wasn't common.
Right.
It was
Well, it
close
was
to
pretty
common.
common.
But that's like reading the next to the last of the Mohicans, which no one ever read.
But it's I don't know. It seemed as though they tried to get it so that everybody would be compliant and the kids would all be able to do the same thing, rather than focus in on what are the basics and how are we getting kids to read? How are we getting them to write? How are we because
Right.
without reading and writing and mathematics,
which I might state right now,
have,
for the record, I never had a problem with, and I always enjoyed having that standard, used that standard, and when I felt a student achieved that standard in the reading and writing, was like praising them to the rafters, going, "You did it. I now deem you competent to go out in that world." I couldn't do the math, but I did the English. That was my shtick, and I felt good about that. What they did around it and after it was atrocious, but getting to that standard helped me immensely. It gave me a benchmark I could use.
And so they're still rolling out dog and pony shows. They're still doing all kinds of stuff.
It's a very simple thing they've made into an absolute travesty.
And when you have so many students who are still failing algebra,
I don't know much about math, but how are they going to mess
which
it up
is required?
that bad? They must be awful teachers.
And in order to graduate from high school, they have to be able to have algebra, geometry, and possibly algebra 2 or another.
And I am not a genius, but if they haven't achieved it yet, they must be doing something terribly wrong, or it's too high at a standard. And I know that's just taboo to talk about, but not everybody has to have a standard that high. It's just not necessary. And someone would say it's a necessary mode of thinking. I disagree. I do. Unless you can do it and convince me of otherwise. And I've tried to be convinced and looked for it, but no one ever steps up to try.
I believe that what they need to do is they need to figure out a way to graduate math one level at a time and scaffold it year after year after year.
It's something.
You cannot allow a student to move forward until they have all the basics down.
If it takes till they're 24, then that's too long. It's your fault. I mean, you can't fault the kid.
Right. And you can't say, well, the kids hate math. Well, guess why? Guess why they hate it? It's because they haven't been taught it so that they can achieve it. If a kid is able to do something and they become comfortable with it,
if I can't teach something like 4 different ways at least, then I can't teach it. And if a kid says, I hate this class, that's on me. It really is.
It is. Because that's their frustration.
Yeah, I have to be able to make it learnable. It's my job. It's not the content. It's my job to be the teacher. Which kind of brought us to this other point about Common Core, is that Common Core just handcuffs you. It really took away so many options that a teacher can utilize just for the sake of standardizing the time and the teaching. It just doused creativity, and it made me in particular and many others miserable teachers, which is what.
Do you want to know a little secret? I never
It's yeah.
I did take trainings. I had
Oh well,
trainings in it,
yeah.
but
Oh
I and doing proficiency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I never really looked or paid much attention to it until I had to begin
yeah.
writing curriculum. And when I started writing the curriculum for high school
Mhm.
completion and credit recovery programs, it was a wide open. It
Well, that's
was
not what I
open
was talking about
territory.
per se. I was talking
What are
about
you talking about?
um, it took away the time because everyone coordinated around the curriculum itself, like the time to be spent, and
Hmm.
so they hyper focused on that, and they took away. Like I had a rock wall, and I used to dedicate my time to like maybe an hour on that rock
Hmm.
wall, and we'd kind of relax and maybe kick around a subject, maybe not. That time went away. I never used that rock wall after 2006 or 7. Gone. Seriously, couldn't get near it again.
Seriously.
We couldn't go there because the kids had to go to reading, remedial reading at this time. Special ed had to work with these students. We couldn't get together to go to the rock wall anymore. I was told to use textbooks, kind of urged. I was even on the textbook committee to pick them, and I didn't use them.
That's when that was
Yes,
when that came out. I was kicked out of different textbook committees because I was told not to waste my
I was
time
put on one.
and to focus
Uh,
on X, Y,
oh,
and Z. And I said, but I teach all of these things, so I need to be in there. No, we want your
hmm.
focus to be here. That
Yeah.
explains it.
So as we went through,
Okay.
people focused on it, and I did not know this, but people in the colleges and the universities were being taught to teach in a more standardized way. They were just accepting it more and more. Either they went in from college or high school and went into college, or college was patterning this, or they were just getting it somewhere because they were starting to get more and more at ease with teaching from the book or accepting being told what to teach and how to teach it, because I was starting to see these teachers applying pressure to me to teach on a calendar and get with the program and use textbooks, to the point where this famous episode came up where I was asked, "Why don't you use a textbook?" And I misunderstood it as a question when it was a directive. And I answered honestly and said, "I never use textbooks." And I should have understood right then. The blade came down on my head. I sealed my fate, honestly. It was like, yo, this guy's got to go. He's like poison. It was true. They let you never use textbooks. It was like sacrilege. It was terrible, but true. Yeah, that's what
Well,
happened.
I was dictated that I needed to have a curriculum written for each one of
Right.
my classes. And I was teaching, and that meant for economics,
Mhm.
algebra 1, geometry, English
A
English
daily
7,
lesson
8,
plan.
9, 10, 11, 12. I had to do it for for English. For science. So we had geography, we had biology, and I can't remember the other stuff that I was teaching. So what I did was I looked at each class and I made a determination as far as what they needed to do in the book. And I said, I am not doing this
Oh,
without a fight. I said, because you are now taking away the community of
well,
my
exactly.
classroom and forcing my students. And they said, but your students, I said, my students
It,
exceed in the
it
state
didn't matter.
standards testing
Yeah.
in everything. But they said, no, yeah,
Didn't matter.
exactly. It didn't matter. They had to comply. And so we started out doing it, and then somehow or other, things weren't going the way that they
Yeah, that's
wanted them to
they just take
go.
away your creativity
And
because
they're,
you. That's how you reach your students. It's like when they wanted me to teach history and they're talking about a standard in history. I mean, the concepts in history and how people interact can be taught, but that's not why I got a Black Studies degree. That's not why I studied like world history instead of like just focused on where it's usually taught. And they want me to do it where it's usually taught again. It's like, no, I purposely rebelled against that. and now you want me to just fall back in line? Did we move backward? Yes, we did. And no one understands that.
We did.
And that's the kicker. I'm saying it again and again. The world's not waiting for us to catch up, and we're teaching kids how to do school in 1950. And it's not getting any better, and we're going, what's wrong?
Well, the problem is the penultimate problem with this whole thing that we're talking about right now with us being forced is the fact that it took away from what alternative
it took away from what education,
education,
all of education is.
Well, right. What education
should be too,
should
should be and was going toward and should have been.
Mm-hmm. And where we were making headway, where we were just we were going. But I know who made that dictate, and they became a state politician.
Yeah. Well, that's what CNBC, this thing said the same thing. It took away the creativity.
Right. It took away the creativity. It took away a lot.
It did. And then it also pointed out the fact that it wanted the schools to be like making up for all of everything else, like poverty and just the lower neighborhood crime rate, or the high crime rates in neighborhoods. And just like, well, why isn't this school performing?
Yeah. Well, because now they all of a sudden, apparently with the Common Core and the state standards, teachers then became social workers. We became family liaisons. We became psychologists, psychiatrists. We became a multitude of different things, and we're still paid 20% less than what we would be paid in the private sector.
Lost to our years to the cost of living. We're behind big time.
Well, this year,
still, it's worse.
I remember somebody saying that they received a 5% pay raise, and somebody said, no, actually, you received a 2 or 3% pay cut because inflation is 7%. So you got a cut in pay. You might feel that you made headway with that 5%, but no.
Well,
so, okay, the pay, you have all these other roles that are going on. And then the unions whose job it is to make sure that teachers are safe, to make sure that teachers' rights
and to negotiate their contracts,
have decided to become
they're represented as a body,
and that's what they're for.
Yeah.
Right. They started getting their little fingers dirty in the making of the Common Core curriculum. Now, what the unions are doing in the Common Core curriculum, I have no idea. That should not have anything to do with the unions. I mean, how many unions actually get involved in the setup of a factory, et cetera, right? Or maybe they do a little bit, but not in the implementation of how you build a car.
So when the Trump administration just cut funding to all of it anyway, I mean, because they went like slash and burning. They took a bunch of the funding out of anything left of the race to the top. Remember that it became race to the top, and then Common Core, sort of the feature. It's there, and everyone's sort of dancing over what's left of the campfire of Common Core. But Trump came and poured a bucket of water on it, so there's really nothing left. But the states kind of act like it. There's 20 states that just took off from it. And they said, this is just not worth it. And it's not. But a bunch of states are still acting like it is because they've invested that emotional, mental, and financial thing into it. And so that's where the unions are kind of getting involved, going, whoa, that's something to fight over. And it may or may not be, but that's kind of developed into a conflict center. And you're right. I don't think the unions have any business in it. It's like it's always should have been up to the teachers. They're the curriculum keepers.
Right. They're the ones who know what they're doing. And don't feed me the caca about people in the teachers union, the officers and teachers unions are teachers and I'm going to use air quotes, educators. An educator is a person who works directly with the students and educates them. A principal is not an educator. A superintendent is not an educator. A principal and other building administrators are just that. They
My
are
union
management.
rep he may be an educator, but I'm an educator as much as he is. He just happens to work in a place that represents all of us as a collective. It doesn't make him a better teacher.
Yes,
So I don't want him
it
representing
doesn't.
me,
And
yeah,
they don't hold
as a
dominion.
teacher.
They hold no
Right.
dominion over us because we can oust them just as
Yeah, we're
quickly as we
co-teachers.
elect.
It doesn't make him a better teacher than I am. So
Right.
yeah, the curriculum should be ultimately in the hands of the teachers, and we really lost sight of that. It's that want to control over them, and because there's a lot of paranoia going on.
There is. And then
Yeah,
the pandemic hit.
so I kind of agreed with them. That you have the Common Core, which dictates that central curriculum. Then the administrators hand
Mhm.
down this, okay, you read this script, to which I firmly say no, and most educators do. And those that do stay are just got horrible morale. And there's this huge fight over the curriculum. And then you said the unions get involved. No one has any business. Because if you're a competent teacher, you should be a competent teacher. And that's your
Right.
curriculum. And you should know what you're doing.
So what are the solutions?
Well, again, that's what I think. It's the curriculum should go back to the teachers, and it's going top down is what's happened. The administrators are telling the teachers, "Here's your script." That's no good. We all know it's way hot top heavy on the administrators, and the curriculum should go back down to the teachers.
And I want the listeners to understand or to ask, how long did your administrator, your superintendent, or anybody in your district office, in your central office, how long did they spend in the classroom?
Mm-hmm.
And were they in the classroom or any classroom that would be even close to what you're working in? Do they have any kind
Right.
of experience? Because I worked with a superintendent who spent 2 years teaching second grade. I had one building administrator who was a PE teacher, claimed to have worked in alternative ed, but had absolutely no clue what he was talking about. Had no interest in anybody's classroom, really.
Mm-hmm.
All he cared about was whether or not he could get something out of it to make him look good. Another one who had taught fourth grade and second grade. And we had a director of curriculum who had never set foot in a classroom
Yeah.
aside from being a student. He had no idea. He didn't know what curriculum construction was or how to play it out. He didn't know anything, and yet he's dictating all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So these are reasons why teachers want to get out,
Mm-hmm.
because they love the kids, they want to be there for the kids. But when they have these inept, incompetent, out of touch, hootenanny pickles telling them what to do,
Yeah, I don't know what to do about it except to
it's hard.
take the military model on. It's kind of like teachers are the non-coms; they're the sergeants, and the kids are the troops. And do the officers, the administrators, really want the troops in their office?
Well,
No.
I actually think that's a really good idea
Yeah.
for teachers to rise up and to tell them no.
It's getting to the point where they might as well, because they're working for pennies on the dollar, and they've gotten no respect. And they say that teachers are appreciated and there's a shortage of them, but they're not hiring teachers. They're hiring para-educators and just telling them what to do.
What to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because teachers are too smart to accept that. And they think that's getting by, but people are not liking it, and they don't have a choice, and that's a problem. It just is. And I don't know how much longer it can go on, but that's the problem. It's not the teachers, not the kids. It's the system that accepts this substandard behavior and calls it okay. It's not okay.
Right. So that tells you, teachers don't believe that administrators really care. Teachers are disposable. They're dispensable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
the whole system's just woefully built It's just not
But let's
supported.
so give me some solutions.
Well, I mean, right now, me,
You think? Well, let's
that's
talk
a
about
whole
solutions.
show. Allow me to walk away and give some notes. I can come back. I've had my
What
ideas over the years, but I mean, I don't venture to try to get
I
that
would love for people to
grand.
write into us and give us some
Yeah,
solutions to it.
I just,
You know,
I've got this. The solution is you don't build a big school. The solution is you build those big relationships. The solution is that's expensive, and the solution is nobody wants to pay for it. I've just been
solution
in it.
is
It
that
does cost
you,
money.
if you were to up the taxes, and if you were to, or maybe
Well,
not send so much money overseas and spend the money that you need to spend domestically
yeah.
and put that into education instead of into big guns and wars
Mm,
and overseas involvement that doesn't need to be
it
happening.
takes a kind of an over I don't know, an over consciousness,
Overhaul.
like we have to start thinking about schools as smaller places in neighborhoods, or where there's like the Durham Ed Center was, that quirky little building. They're not like schools, or maybe schools stay, but more schools just become
I
small
think you
schools
have.
and
I
community
think that you
centers, and
have.
yeah.
You do have the people to fill the schools.
Yeah,
I think
they'll
that,
be around.
but then you also need to be able to take kids and bring them into smaller environments.
Much smaller, like maybe even dance studio type, 35 kids who focus on one thing, and let it evolve and let it happen
Are you
instead of
saying
going,
going with Peter Gray,
not
going the Peter Gray
yeah,
way, where the kids
I,
determine what they're going to do
maybe in some
and they set
place,
their own
certainly in some
goals, and then
place,
they
yeah,
direct their own course of
I could
study, and
certainly
then
run a
they
school like that, yeah.
learn their math through relevance. They learn the
Yes,
reading and writing abilities that
I'd
they
love a
need through
school like that,
relevance. So
yeah.
every student that you have, let's say that you have 12 students in your class, every one of them might be working on something
Mhm.
else, but then they might be working with each other and
Yeah,
confabbing with each other and doing things.
and can just
So,
keep on getting better and better at it until they
right.
start making money at it, and that's called a career. I mean, it's, oh wow, geez, I guess we're going to graduate you soon. You're already making money at this, kid.
I would also say that we don't necessarily need to keep pointing kids in the direction of colleges and
Oh, we have to
universities
stop that. We've made it not worth it. We have made it not worth it.
because so many kids look at me and they say, "What's the point of graduating high school? I'm not planning on going to
Well,
college."
that's just got that. That's not relevant. I think that that's not something that can be
Well, it's
argued.
not,
You need to graduate with a basic level of skills because you need to
you
communicate with the
do.
rest of humanity.
But
Yeah,
do they really need a high school
I don't
education?
think so. Not if what high school is offering is a common core. No, I would say challenge that system. I say enough of the people that don't get a high school education and leave and go forward and be successful without one makes it irrelevant. And I think they should worry about that.
So kids need structure.
Yeah.
Teachers need to be able to have a structure in which they can provide that
Hmm.
structure, but they also need to have a structure that builds morality and builds upon their
Yeah.
strengths rather than one that's dictative.
We know how to
Is that a
be,
word?
yeah, dictative,
Or
dictative,
yeah, dictatory?
dictatorial, dictatorial,
Yeah. Oh, there we are.
dictatorial. There it
Okay.
is.
We hit it.
Wrote. That's what, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, yeah, I've got my ideas on that. Yeah, we're on the verge of stepping past rote education. Like I said, it could be that the high school diploma may disappear, it may become completely meaningless very soon. Hmm.
I don't know that that's true.
I'm seeing it. I can see it. I can see it. And I'm not the smartest feller. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed, but I can see how it could just make itself meaningless. Yeah.
Hmm.
Huh. Because they're not sensitive. They're just not getting it. They're filling roles of teachers and paraeducators and giving them scripts to read. Nobody wants to be in a place like that.
No,
And
no, but I think most teachers are getting around it. But here's the thing: when you have these people who come in and they dictate your students need to do X, Y, and
mhm,
Z in order to get their credits
mhm.
done, to make up their credit for this other class, which is AQP instead of XYZ. And it just doesn't match up. And so you say, no, we're trying to do AQP. And they say, no, 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 we won't allow that. They're not looking at what's in the best interest of the student.
That's exactly it.
And I don't think any of this does. And I think we need to bring the students to the forefront. They keep talking about creating student-centered curriculum, but it's it's all a bunch of
That's
hot air. They
crazy
don't
making,
care.
because they don't know what it is. They're actually,
That's what the gaslight is.
yeah,
That's the master
God,
gaslight.
yeah,
Because they say, we're here for the students, but here's what you're going to do. Because they really don't care. Because when they're in administration, if we talked about, because we talked about education, the education corporations
yeah,
and the education money machine,
right.
which is huge. If I wanted to go to the Education Week Marketplace conference, it would have cost me something like, I think it was $1,200 or $1,500 if you were,
Wow, it's a lot of money.
yeah, yeah. But that's what they charge. So you can go there and see the latest educational innovations.
Yeah,
And this was just the price of admission. That's not including the flight, the meals, the
yeah, yeah,
hotel, blah blah blah.
per person.
So
And that was easily, and
so
what they're giving you is what they sanction per se.
mhm.
Yeah,
And what they've taken a look at,
yeah. What they
and
endorse,
exactly.
approve.
But they're, because it sounds like the next best thing. The next best thing is actually right here. It's kind of like what Frank L. Baum would say, there's no place like home,
Right.
because home is where it's all created. This is where we were instructed, we have the tools in order to create and teach the students exactly what it is that they need. And if we don't, we know what resources we need to have.
Hmm.
We don't need you to go out and spend that money. So instead of spending that money, put it back into teachers. Instead of hiring more and more administrators and more staff to fill the district offices, put that into teaching and into the students.
I just reminded of a little story. It's like, here's how smart I am. That would go to these conferences and they go, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this thing here. It's got all these cards and we're going to do this. Here's this thing. And it's really important that we do this and that. And I would look at it and go, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah. And I'd copy off this and I'd copy off that. And I'd take like just the best things from it. And that's what I'd use. And over the years, I got this really good file of like all the best things from all of these things I was supposed to use. And I'm really smart when I think about it, because it's like, that's what makes me a good educator. I took only the best things from all these things. I got this really good folder of really good things, really, really great things from all of those, but I never used the script. It was like I was always just looking for the tidbits of good things. Some things had really great things in them. Some were garbage, but that's what a good educator is supposed to do. I'm an editing
Mhm.
machine. I'm intelligent. I know how to transcribe to the student. I don't know how to read a script. I'm not a salesman. That I was never a
I
salesman. Salesmen read the script and they give it heart and soul. That ain't me. I'm the heart and the soul.
I read the script, but
Yeah.
I read it my way.
Well, yeah, I guess. I think it was you just synthesizing what you know about it all and putting it into the thing you need to deliver, is what I did.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that the students actually were, one, listening, and
Yeah,
two, getting the information that they needed to
right.
have. And if I thought something was ridiculous, I said, no, we're going to skip that part and we're going to make
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
now.
Or add a story, or hey, today's
Right.
just too heavy. So we'll just do the lighter part of this topic. Tomorrow we'll do the heavier part. It's just
Mm-hmm.
knowing people. It's not, it's Tuesday. We must be doing lesson 3. That I've seen teachers do that. I've been taught that way, and that ain't no way to learn.
No, and I was thrown into a scripted program with very little training. There was supposed to be it was mandated that there were X number of hours of training that had to go into this. And I found out what my assignment was, and I walked up to the vice principal and I said, when do I start training? And he goes, for what? And I said, this class you put me in. He goes, what class is that? And he said, oh, well, you were supposed to set that up. And I said, since when? When was I supposed to set up a training that for a class that you put me in that you say requires specific training? He said, well, who did you call? And I said, I'm talking to you. I don't know who to call. Can we make that call? So I ended up going in late. They made a concession for me. They got me in late. I had 1 day of training, and I started the next week with no textbooks.
With no tools. So you didn't have the training or the tools.
And they said, well, get them copied at the copy center. And I said, I can't, because other teachers I would get a few pages done, but I have teachers, because we were short on textbooks, and all the copies that had to be done had to go through one copy center, and we had textbooks being copied by teachers all over the district. So it took a month and a half.
I know what happened, Mac.
For me to get
I know what happened. This is before you got your magic license for being a teacher. So after a certain amount of years, you get a magical license, or it just happens magically. Materials appear in the knowledge forms, and you can just go anywhere. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I get that as a guest teacher. They give me like, just put this up on the screen. And it's like, A, I can't access the email. B, on this, or like the tech goes sideways, and it's like me and like maybe 20 kindergartners in 45 minutes. It's nightmarish.
Well, this program also only allowed for, I think it was for like 18 students to be in this class.
Oh, wow.
It was a remedial class. And the counselors had me up to 20. I was not going to be able to break it into the groups that I was supposed to be able to break it into, because I didn't have enough computers. I didn't have enough textbooks. I didn't have enough of this other stuff. And so I was told, deal with it.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not going to deal with it, because according to my contract, if this is untenable. So I went back to that assistant principal and I said, what's the deal with this? Because the counselors tell me that they're not taking kids out. Now, you didn't get me the training I was supposed to have. You've packed my classroom with too many students. Do you want me to work here, or are you asking me to stay or leave? They said, no. We need you. And I said, well, I can't teach this class. You're going to have to break that out somehow.
Yeah.
And he said, well, what are we going to have to do? And I said, either get me a bigger classroom, because this was a tiny room. Get me more computers. Get me the damn textbooks. Or you're going to have to put some of these kids on.
This is not an unusual story. I mean,
it's not.
For you it was, but
I won.
That's an unusual story.
And then the kids were absolutely unruly. They really couldn't read very well. And then all of a sudden, this Joy showed up at my door, and it was a TA. And she said, could you use my help in here?
Oh.
I said, you are a lovely vision. Please. Yes. And so she and her husband are still close friends. And she helped me, because she was able to monitor one group of kids, and she took them over here and she worked with them, and I was able to monitor the other two. and we got the whole thing going, and it worked really well. And the relationships, I mean, had great relationships with the majority of those kids. And the worst one of my kids, he went off. I bumped into him later, and I was working with his mother.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was.
Or you work with the kids of the kid.
But sometimes, you're in the rockiest seas and you end up with the smoothest sailing later on with and the best experience.
So that can
So
occur if you get
know.
what you get. A lot of times they don't give you that.
Yeah.
Or it just doesn't work. But you got lucky on that one. And
It's
you
true.
had a boundary you drew.
But I believe, getting back to the topic,
Yeah,
if teachers stand their ground, teachers need to stand their ground. They need to remind the administrators who's really in charge of that building.
well, and they also
It's not the administrator. And if they say, I will write you up, say, okay, write me up, and you write them up, and you write them up, and you get enough people standing there to be written up.
and
There is safety in numbers.
there's safety in them.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to wrap
Let's
up.
do it.
And have a wonderful week. Remember to check us out on Sunday. And next week we will have another show for you in the middle of the week.
Aloha.
Okay. Ciao. Bye-bye.